It is 10 o'clock exactly, and I believe that we are going live. So yes, that's right. So my Zoom is actually announcing that we are in fact live. Thank you everyone for tuning in this morning. Unfortunately, we've all waked this morning with sad news from Ukraine, and we've all seen that Russia moved on with invasion in the eastern part of the Ukraine. So we, in light of that, we had to of course adjust this panel, and of course adjust the title of this panel. So it's no longer the Russian-Ukrainian conflict; it's actually the Russian invasion of Ukraine and implications on Western Balkans. I'd like to mention that we this morning, of course, have with us a special guest, Ms. Natalia Fialka, who's charge of affairs of Ukraine here in Montenegro. Another point that I would like to mention is also that we've sent an invitation to the Russian embassy here in Montenegro, wanting to make this panel as balanced as possible in terms of the points of view, but we had no positive response on their part. Unfortunately, what is happening currently in Ukraine is something that we've all been fearing for the past few months. President Putin, in his address right before the invasion started, among other things, said, and I quote here, "To anyone who would consider interfering from the outside, if you do, you will face consequences greater than any you have faced in history. All relevant decisions have been taken. I hope you hear me." End of quote. Unfortunately, this threatening and gloomy tone that we've seen here indicates that maybe Putin has no intention of stopping at the borders of Donetsk and Lugansk, and he might actually move on and invade the whole Ukraine. If we all haven't been paying a close attention, somewhat 15 years ago, when Putin actually, in his infamous speech during the Munich Security Conference, unraveled his new pursuit for a revisionist foreign policy designed to overturn the global security order that emerged after the Cold War, I think that all of us are paying very close attention now. Right after that speech in February 2007, he started a war in Georgia in 2008. Then we had annexation of Crimea and a not so covert war in Ukraine in 2014, and we've seen the new actions this morning. So what Putin actually wants is to leave a legacy for his 70th anniversary next year, and to bring Russian glory days of the Soviet Union. This crisis seems as a very test also for the Western allies, and the test for the unity and cohesion of the Western allies. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel today. So we do have a special guest, as I mentioned, Ms. Natalia Fialka, who's charge of affairs of Ukraine here in Montenegro. Then with us is Othon Anastasakis, director of the Southeast European Studies at the University of Oxford. Mr. Zlatko Vujovic, President of the Center for Monitoring and Research here in Montenegro, and Mr. Mihailo Samus, who is Director of New Geopolitics Research Network, who is calling in this morning from Ukraine. So I would like to start with you, Natalia, and just would like to hear your take on what is currently happening in Ukraine, what are the next steps for President Zelensky, and what are the reactions of the international community, and what should we all do at this very moment in order to de-escalate the further Russian invasion.
Thank you very much, Azra, for deep insight. You pretty much said a lot of things that I wanted to stress on. But what I wanted to say that today our relatives and first my relatives woke up in Ukraine hearing bomb explosions. This is something that has not happened in Ukraine for many, many years. And actually, finally, this day has come. We warned the international community for a long time that Putin is going to attack Ukraine and he will not stop on the eastern part and Crimea. And today, Moscow launched the new wave of aggression. I would like to say that it's a new wave, and this is something that happened actually exactly 8 years ago. The goal of Russian offensive is to destroy Ukrainian state. We all heard very well Putin neglecting Ukrainian statehood and existing of Ukrainians as themselves. That's why the main task is to seize by force Ukrainian territory and establish occupational control. Russian armed forces launched attacks on peaceful Ukrainian cities, including from the territory of occupied Crimea and Donbass, as well as from the southeast and from the territory of Belarus, although they claimed so many times that, sorry, I have to turn off my phone. They claimed so many times that the military drills with Belarus have no threats to Ukrainian territory. And tonight, the 6 airports were attacked, as well as the many military infrastructure. Columns of Russian tanks are entering Luhansk region, and all combats actions continue in this direction. Of course, Ukraine considers it as an act of war, an attack on sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and a brutal violation of the UN Charter and all many other basic norms of international law. Ukraine has activated its right to self-defense in accordance with Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Our military forces are responding to the attack, and so far we have the most recent information is that we destroyed 6 Russian military airplanes. Unfortunately, we bear already human losses, and I just received photos of the destructions made by the Russian military aggression and bombs, and death of our soldiers. Of course, we call on immediately international community to act strictly, and only with united voices and decisive actions we can stop Putin's aggression against Ukraine. We appreciate the words of support, but not words, but actions should be taken right now. We call on international community to immediately enact a package of new sanctions. We also call on friendly capitals to continue strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities by providing weapons and military equipment. Of course, there will be a big issue of humanitarian help right now, because I'm afraid that we're facing a new humanitarian crisis as well, and a new wave of refugees may appear in Ukraine as well as all over the world. Many Ukrainians, since the air connections with Ukraine is stopped, we have many Ukrainians trapped all around the world. And the big question is whether they will be able to come back to Ukraine in the nearest future, or they would be able to and willing to go into the military battlefield. So, of course, this is a very important question for us now. What do we see? What do we consider should be done first of all right now? Of course, it's a drastic sanctions against Russia, including exemption of Russia from the SWIFT system. It's military assistance to Ukraine and humanitarian and economic aid. The martial law has been activated today in Ukraine, and of course, it's understandable there's quite a big panic in Ukrainian cities, especially those who are closer to the Russian-Belarusian borders. But still, people in general remain relatively calm, and the most important thing that they're very patriotic, and nobody wants to give up, is ready to give up, and they're ready to defend our state.
Thank you, Natalia, for this summary of the latest happenings. Unfortunately, we've seen from the Russian side, besides the military at the borders of Ukraine and today's actions, we've seen other actions. We've seen the disinformation war that has been also going on for months. The narratives that's been pushed through in terms of contra-narrative that actually the Ukraine is the one that is violating the Minsk agreement, and that is the Ukraine that is committing genocide. So in terms of that, and we've seen yesterday the cyber attacks that are still not determined where are they coming from, but we can all of course guess. So how do you see on this? Because we've seen the what's has been talked about at the UN General Assembly, and how the Russian ambassador was actually going on about why the Russia is actually protecting the interests of the Russian people in Donetsk and Lugansk. What do you say about this narrative, and how harmful maybe that was in the eyes of the people that were observing the whole situation in terms to de-escalate the crisis, in terms to that would bring us to this moment where Russia pushed through a different narrative in order to be able to do this today?
First of all, I would like to stress that we consider that the Ukrainian citizens are on the both sides of contact line. These are our Ukrainian citizens, and of course our main goal is to protect them. Nobody is going to harm those people, no matter what political stances they have right now. And of course, nobody is buying Russian the disinformation campaign anymore. All sane people and all sane international community is aware of what is really going on, or either in Ukraine or on the occupied territories. In the modern technologies now, with the modern technologies, you can actually see online what is going on wherever we want. So we see many proofs, online proofs, that there were no any actual attacks from Ukrainian side to the occupied territories. And nobody is going to do that. What we are going to do is to defend our land.
Thank you, Natalia, for this. I would like to, now to move to Mikhailo. He's calling in from Ukraine. I want to hear what is the current sentiment in Ukraine. You are on the ground, and please share with us what is the current sentiment there, and in your view. In terms of the military capabilities, and in case the Russia goes further than the eastern parts of the Ukraine, how ready is Ukraine to defend itself?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me, and yeah, it's a special moment. It's a crazy moment. I would say that we didn't expect really that Putin will decide to launch the full-scale operations. Even yeah, from the military point of view, it's not very efficient. Could be for Russia, because actually, if we counting on the Russian capabilities from for example, from the land forces, that they don't have actually the second echelon, and they try to, as I understand, they try to now for several waves of the missiles to destroy all of Ukrainian air defense. And now we have the pause between two waves, because as I understand it, now they are re-estimating by satellites what is the state of Ukrainian airfields and air defense systems, because mostly what Russian done now, they make missile strikes, mostly it's Caliber missiles from Black Sea Fleet to all of Ukrainian military airfields to destroy the actually the airfields and for all of Ukrainian air defense system. As I understand it, it wasn't very effective regarding Ukrainian fighters and military aircraft, because it looks like when they strike the airfields already, we didn't have any Ukrainian aircraft there, so we didn't have a loss of aircrafts. But of course, we lost a lot of air defense now, especially stationary, like S-300 stationary systems, which is were hit and struck by missiles. Now Russians well re-estimated, and I expect next wave in the closest time, because as they didn't destroy all of air defense, they cannot proceed further. As we understand now, they cross the border from all of Ukrainian border, actually, especially from Belarus, from different directions, because even in open sources we can see that they cross in the Ukrainian Belarus border and Russian Ukrainian border on the close to the Kharkiv. But after this, they stopped and waiting until they will destroy air defense and use the Air Force aviation strikes, because without airstrikes they cannot send tanks, because now we have a most intensive land forces battle on the Donbas. So on the Donbas, Ukrainian forces very successfully destroying Russian tanks, because they have javelins and other weapons. And obviously, as officially Ukrainian Minister of Defense told that we already hit six aircraft close to the area of on the area of operations, especially on the Donbas. So what I expect, Putin of course will be push on military, but the military, they cannot go further without airstrikes. So next step should be airstrikes against Ukrainian forces staying on different positions. And obviously that Ukrainian forces not staying on the border. That's why Russian tanks, they cross the border and stay exactly beyond the border, because Ukrainian forces staying like 20-30 kilometers on the distance from the border to avoid the artillery fire from the Russian territory, because Russia made a huge and intensive artillery fires preparation before all of operations, together with missile strikes. So now it's decisive. I think it's a decisive day today, decisive hours. If Ukrainian forces will keep air defense, and if Ukrainian forces will be successfully defending Donbass and Crimea, because from Crimea they're trying to make landing operations, and again they making the artillery preparations, artillery fire preparations. So if Ukrainian will stop all of these elements, I mean especially Donbass, and will keep air defense and aviation, it will be pretty challenging for Putin go to the second stage, because in reality they don't have thousands of missiles. They have approximately 100, maybe 120 calibers on the Black Sea Fleet. So it means like I think they used already half of them, and maybe it will be one more wave at the same intensity against air defense. So after this, they should decide, or they go in with aviation, and Ukraine will hit some aircraft, or they should try to call to Biden and propose to some Minsk tree or something like this. And they, of course, they will ask about the Putin told it openly, demilitarization of Ukraine, denationalization of Ukraine. It means that they will demand that Ukraine should be pro-Russian state, and of course the no NATO, no European Union integration. So I think that today is a decisive point from the military, and I think that European and United States sanctions will be very important here. As I heard now that Germany and other European partners told that it will be a total disaster for Russian bank system. I mean that Russian bank system cannot use European markets at all, and it means that total stop of the connection. And of course, I hope that of course no Northern Stream 2 at all. It's obviously because it's a full-scale operation, a full-scale invasion, and it's impossible to even to talk about it. So I think that it will be very interesting what President Biden will say. Very interesting that President Erdogan very intensively trying to support Ukraine, and at the same time trying to make some negotiations with Putin, trying to avoid the worst scenario. So we'll see. I hope that Ukrainian armed forces will show Russians that they could fight, and they will effectively defend the forces. And of course, the decisive point is air defense. And of course, when we talked for years, what is the main gap for Ukrainian defense? I always told it missile defense, of course. And unfortunately, we didn't get this missile defense system yet. And I would say that actually rare countries in the NATO, they have a missile defense. It's kind of maybe only United States have the efficient missile defense systems against Russian missiles. So I think it will be the next step for development of the NATO countries to look at the Russian-Ukrainian war and make the experience on it, that missile defense should be the strongest element of the modern armed forces of the NATO member. Thank you very much, and I'd like to answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Mikhail, for this great overview of the current situation in Ukraine, the military aspect, and you've mentioned, of course, the sanctions. We will be talking about that. I just want to include, of course, others in this first round of questions, and go to Zlatko for this one. So we've seen that sanctions have been announced and implemented from Monday after the Putin officially recognized Donetsk and Lugansk. I think that in this set of sanctions that EU, United States, UK, and other countries that joined the sanctions, the most probably the most shocking was actually the decision from the Chancellor Scholz to pause or let's say put a stop on the Nord Stream 2. So how effective do you believe that sanctions and how far-fetched should the sanctions be in order to deter Russia? We've known that ever since 2014, Russia has been diversifying its financial market, has lowered the dollar reserves, moved to gold and euro, and has been intensified its cooperation with China and Iran in the first place in order to be less dependent on the Western financial markets. So in your opinion, how effective these sanctions will be, and how will and for how long it will affect Russia, when we can expect those sanctions to kick in?
So thank you, Azra. There was a lot of the, let's say, indicating move that were indicating that Russia is preparing for this war for Ukraine. And you mentioned some moves from the financial point of view, because Russia and Putin were expecting financial sanctions. And I think that they believe that they are ready to part of those sanctions. They are aware that it's going they are going to suffer on that. But I think that they believe also that the stake to let's say to occupy at least part of the Ukraine is for them more important than to face the sanctions. The sanctions that were announced, that were planned, you know, they are not enough. I think that the Western allies, they are still making a lot of the mistake, not supporting Ukraine in the right way. They needed to provide enough little arms, you know, weapons to the Ukraine, that they could be able to fight in the proper way with Russia. And I think that the hesitation from the Western sides actually encourage Putin to be very aggressive. And this is not the only case with Ukraine. In Ukraine, we experienced two similar situations. With Crimea, the response of the war was very, very weak. Then the Donbass and Donetsk and Lugansk, also very weak response of the West, you know, still not giving the Ukraine the right and proper arms to fight. On the other hand, even the case of Ukraine is it's not solely an example of Putin attempts. Just look what happened in Georgia. Then we have this the frozen conflict in Moldova. The Putin really believes in some kind of the empire or whatever to restore the Russian Empire or Soviet Union or something like that. And it's not going to stop. This is going to be moved in other areas after this. And I think the most under the risk are the Moldova and Georgia and Western Balkans. But let's wait, let's leave that for later, you know. So I think that sanctions are not enough. They are not strong as situation is asking. So yes, in some normal cases, you know, if there was some, let's say, not military conflicts, okay, they are strong. But when we are talking that one European country, the free and independent country, was attacked with the idea to occupy the territories of the full country, this is not enough. This is like the reaction in the case of the Czechoslovakia in 1938, you know, not like in the Poland 1939. Okay, Russia has the nuclear, its nuclear power, they have nuclear, but the West missed a lot of opportunities to make the Ukraine much stronger, and not only with the guns, with the military support, but they were very slow in supporting Ukraine regarding the European integration. Everything, it is too slow, and due to the problems within the EU and within the NATO, we are facing now the crisis like this one.
Thank you very much, Zlatko. This gives me a great introduction to the next point, and that is what should, and we've seen that specifically Poland has called for and Baltic countries triggered consultation under NATO Article 5, and we've seen that haven't had the opportunity to see if there is any feedback from the ministerial meeting at NATO this morning. We are expecting the meeting at the EU level as well. So do you believe that Western unity and cohesion can withstand this crisis in terms, if it only let's say rests on the invasion of the eastern part of Ukraine? Will the sanctions, like it happened in 2014, they didn't withstand the longer period of time? Then there was some disagreement within the EU member states to what extent those sanctions should be. And now we are at this next stage where if those sanctions in 2014 were more effective, I believe we wouldn't be at this point here now. So what's your take on that?
This is the really big point when we are talking about the allies and the NATO member countries as well as the EU, because the cohesion and the unity is very weak, and the Russia and the Putin was investing and pouring a lot of the money in the different political parties and the leaders, and also using the gas as an instrument how to influence the policies and the standing position of the different governments. So the Western allies were missing for example, when we see in the Balkans, we have Serbia led by Mr. Vučić, who is the main ally of the Russia in the Western Balkans, acting as a proxy, trying to destabilize the other countries. Even some of them are the member of the NATO. And NATO was closing the eyes on that, So very often they are closing eyes on many things, and then we are faced with the bigger problem. So I think that this is going to let's say, to mobilize the forces within the NATO member countries, and that the approach that they had until now is not functioning. In the 60s, if we had this crisis, the reaction of the US would be much stronger, and also the allies of NATO would react, within the NATO would react stronger. But in this case, the Ukraine is really is facing a lot of the problems. Just remember what happened during the Maidan, and that there was a lot of the support coming from the EU countries, that the Ukraine and the promises from the West. A lot of those promises were not delivered. Yes, Ukraine has a lot of the problem. There is a lot of the corruption, etc. But there is also corruption in other countries. But I think that the involvement of the EU and the NATO allies should be much stronger, and it could prevent the war. But being afraid from the Putin reactions, now we are facing the situation which is worse than we could imagine.
Thank you very much. This actually brings me to another important point on when looking on a more broad strategic level and looking at the global affairs. So I would like to turn to Othon now and see his assessment on this point. A lot of observers have been talking about the new axis of autocracy that is happening between China and Russia. So, in your view, how this conflict positions China? As we know, China sees United States as its equal, not the Russia, and somehow it seems that Russia is for now fine with that, as long as it attributes to their own interests. But in a longer term, how do you believe this will position China, especially looking at other problems in the Pacific region, and of course looking at China's interests in Europe, because they oppose those of the Russia, while Russia wants to maintain the constant level of tensions and create disagreements between NATO and EU members. On the other hand, it seems that China has more pragmatic and economic interests in mind in Europe, and it doesn't really care much about NATO as well. So, please.
Thank you very much, Azra. And I would first like to say that that's such a sad morning, and we are all thinking of Ukrainian people. We're thinking of the relatives and friends of Natalia, but also our own friends who are there in Ukraine. And if there is a moment actually that we have to stand united behind Ukraine, is this one. Because, and I think the references that also Zlatko makes to history are so poignant, are so relevant, because what we are thinking, I mean, it's such a coincidence that Munich was also, you know, the city that the Western leaders gathered very recently. It's also reminiscent of what happened, you know, in Czechoslovakia. And then also, you know, seeing a leader like Putin, you always have, you know, he speaks about denazification, and then we are also thinking that, you know, he is the one who's actually the Nazi invading the country next door. And it's also, your question, I think, is also very, very relevant in terms of what we are seeing now is the fight between two different political systems. We've got a democratic camp on the one hand, which is about the West, and we've got the autocratic camp. That has been actually been, you know, developing during the last years, how autocracies are becoming more and more dominant in certain parts of the world. And we've got actually all these buildings in Ukraine, which is a country that is actually fighting for its own democracy, for its own independence, to decide what kind of course it wants to take. And for me, that's so relevant to everybody, because we're actually fighting for our own democracy in Ukraine, among other things. And in that sense, this is really a moment that we all have to mobilize to save our own democratic systems via Ukraine. And then, obviously, this is the moment that, you know, Europe and the European Union finally has to go united. I mean, I can't see any other, you know, incident that really gives that kind of push, that the countries have to be united. You know, enough with all those prevarications among the European Union member states, you know, some of them feeling closer to Putin, others feeling, you know, more alienated from Putin. Actually, there needs to be the same degree of alienation towards Russia, because it is a threat to everybody, including the countries in Europe that have got closer relations, you know, with Russia than others. I'm speaking on behalf of my both kind of countries. One of them is Greece, which is a country that has been, you know, relatively softer and with historical ties with Russia. But at the same time, I believe that there is a common sense developing there and a consensus on what is happening. And in Britain here, which is a much stronger advocate of the anti-Russian kind of sentiment, but at the same time, a country that has been receiving Russian oligarchs' money here, Russian rich people sending their kids in schools here, and so on and so forth. So there needs to be that kind of decisive action. And then your point about China is very important, because China is a very interesting case. On the one hand, it is an autocracy. So it goes very close to how Putin rules his own country. That's one thing. At the same time, China is an economic power. China thinks differently in terms of its strategic outlook in the world. It is not a military power yet. It might have wanted, but it's not a military. China wants to use its economic power primarily, its military might in its own neighborhood. So this is where it is contained at the moment. But it wants actually to be able to have its kind of strategic economic plan. And we had very interesting discussions lately in Oxford as well with Chinese students, but also our other scholars of the Western Balkans, on how China is revising its own economic strategy and its Belt and Road Initiative, in making it more high quality in a way, much more focused to particular areas. So there is a clear economic interest there for China, that it wants to not to disrupt its own kind of economic force in Europe. And in that sense, even China might actually be torn. We expect that it will be on the side of Putin, and we've seen how the two had a very close meeting together. And indeed, there are various issues in China as well that go better with Putin's own policies. What's happening in Taiwan, what's happening with the issue of minorities as well within China, and the criticism that comes from the West. But at the same time, this is a capitalist economy that wants the West to function. So that, I think, is going to be very interesting to see how China is going to play with this particular division and dichotomy that, as I said at the beginning, is clearly a fight between two political systems.
Thank you very much for this good analysis of the and your point is right when you say that we are actually fighting between two systems, one that is autocratic and the second one that is democratic, that we also here all aspire to more implement and to be more in tune with. On that note, I would like to move to the sort of section where we analyze more how this invasion will affect other regions, especially our region here in the Western Balkans, because nobody by this point, I think, believes that Putin will actually stop on these borders. So if he has a new revisionist and sort of let's call it imperial aspirations, it will, of course, try to move to the Eastern Central Europe and the Western Balkans as well. So we've seen for the past decades how Russia influences countries in the Western Balkans, especially here in Montenegro. We've seen how that happened in 2016, and only because of the NATO membership later in 2017, we've had sort of this few years gap of stability, maybe lowered influence, but then with the change in government in Montenegro, we've seen some other processes happening. On this note, I would like to turn to Zlatko once again and to hear his view on how the Russian and Ukrainian relationship can be maybe compared and are there any similarities in how Serbia and Montenegro's relationship has developed through history and in the few years as well, especially for the past 2 years, where we've seen the strong influence from Serbia through the Serbian church, etc., here in Montenegro. Zlatko, the floor is yours. I think we've lost Zlatko for a moment, so I will refer this question also maybe to you, and then when Zlatko joins again, then we can get him back.
Yes, the Western Balkans are not a frontline kind of environment for Russia, and it's always been of secondary importance, obviously, in terms of when that is compared with its own neighborhood, Ukraine, Georgia, and all the other countries in its western neighborhood. Now, the thing is that with the Western Balkans, obviously, because we all know they are outside the European Union, they are in that sense in the most vulnerable position. That has been very kind of tactically as well as cleverly, if I can say that, utilized by Russia. Now we're not going to see a war happening coming from Russia in the Western Balkans. This is something that shouldn't be expected, but definitely we know about hybrid wars that are happening there, and we've also seen, as you say, concrete instances in this. I mean, we've seen what happened in Montenegro when it was about to decide to get into NATO. We've seen how frustrating was the role of Russia when the name dispute between Greece and North Macedonia was to be decided. And we also know that they've been, creating very, very close links in Bosnia with Republika Srpska in order to be able to continue with this environment of insecurity in the Balkans, because this is actually and the very close links as well with Vučić and Serbia. And at some point also Serbia needs to take a clear position on this because actually it's part of the West, geographically as well as economically. And in that sense, I mean, there are clear interests there. You just cannot stand on different boats because, at the end, you're going to sink into the sea. You just have to take a position in all of this. So I think that in terms of those proxy, those wars, or the hybrid environment that Russia is using, it will continue definitely. I mean, the propaganda war and the special relations in various kind of aspects of diplomacy that Russia is using, be that in the energy sector or being that in the religious sector or in the cultural sector, that is going to continue to pan out. I mean, there are also Russian interests in the Balkan environment, and it's not just about the Western Balkans. It's also what's happening in Bulgaria as well. The elites are divided between themselves and with how to approach that issue. There is a very big presence in the northern part of Greece as well from Russian oligarchs, and we've seen also in what happened in Croatia, an EU country, a NATO country, and we've got that division in its political elite as well. It's not easy, but when push comes to shove, and you've got that kind of situation, war situation, I mean, for me, it's easier actually to take some kind of a position.
Thank you. So we have Zlatko back, and I want to bring you into the conversation. I don't know if you've heard my question in the first place. So what's your take on the parallel between Russia, Ukraine, and Serbia-Montenegro relations, and how do you believe this will affect the Western Balkans, especially in terms of the divisions in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the parallels that Russia uses with Kosovo as well, and having in mind the current political crisis in Montenegro, which is a NATO member country, how do you believe this moves forward?
There are a lot of the similarity between the relationship Russia, Ukraine, and Serbia and Montenegro. Historically, Ukrainian nation, similar to Montenegrin nation, is divided. There is a strong influence of the Russian cultural, religious, etc. Russia never really recognized the Ukraine, like Serbia never recognized really when we are talking about all the position and the position of the politicians, key politicians, Montenegro. So now they are, but there is a big difference. We are part now of the NATO, so Serbia cannot do what they were doing in the 90s, you know. We experience what unfortunately Ukraine is experiencing now. Serbia attacked and tried to occupy most of the parts of the Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also this war in Kosovo. And they were very close to war with Montenegro, even that officially Montenegro was a part of the Yugoslavia. In 1997, 1999, we are so close to the war, and somehow we avoided all those conflicts. But still, now we are facing in Montenegro a hybrid war against the Montenegro, financed and supported not only by the Serbia but Russia and the Serbia. Russia has the problem to apply all the ideas and plans for Montenegro because it's not neighboring country like Ukraine. There are no many Russian, few percent of the people who are not citizens of Montenegro, but they live in Montenegro. But what they are forced to use the resources of the Serbia. We are talking about the Secret Service, we are talking about the paramilitary groups, the parapolitical groups that financed by Russia, and the Serbian Orthodox Church. Serbian Orthodox Church is heavily financed by Russia, and they are influenced by Russia and controlled mostly. Belgrade is providing the support to all Russian initiatives and actions in Montenegro, and it was we have even today some articles about the involvement even of some officials from Serbia in the coup d'etat in 2016. So for many people in Montenegro, it was so hard to believe that Russia had idea to organize the coup d'etat in 2016 in order to prevent Montenegro joining the NATO. But now, who could believe that one European nation is attacking in 21st century another European nation to conquer? This is not 17th century, you know, or beginning of the 20th century where Hitler was in the Germany. But this is happening. This is the reality. And now the Russia and Serbia are using a little bit more softer, let's say, scenario. Okay, we cannot really take over the control. We cannot prevent the joining, but we can change the government in Montenegro. So we have a lot of the resources. We have the money, we have the people, we have the Serbian Orthodox Church, and we will use that, and we will have some ally country within the NATO. Then that means that they will show to the NATO we can have a control. It's not only Montenegro. They were financing a lot of the campaigns in the different countries of the EU member countries or the NATO countries. So we had so bad experience with the Trump administration. This is possible even in the US. So they adapted. They are using the clashes, the conflicts within the society in order to support one side that should be more, let's say, aligned with the interests of the official Russia. And it is a very intelligent approach. You know, it's very successful. In Montenegro, it resulted with the pro-Russian government, which is doesn't have any more support, but they are organizing the pro-Russian parties in Montenegro, organized blockade today in Montenegro. The old main, let's say, entrance in the city, in the towns will be blocked by the pro-Russian forces, you know, in order to make pressure to keep the control over the executive, over the government, you know. We are witnessing these days how big this gap within the Montenegrin society when we are talking about the situation in Ukraine. Most of the political parties from the ruling coalition, still ruling coalition, Democratic Front, Democratic Montenegro, those parties that they are pro-Serbian, pro-Russian, but they were always, most of them claiming that they are pro-European, that they are supporting NATO, etc., blah, blah, blah. But actually what is happening now, this is like lakmus paper, I don't know how it's in English, you know. So it's a very indicator how what is the reality in Montenegro. And in reality, in Montenegro, that the most part, almost 90%, 95% on the current ruling majority, still current ruling majority, is pro-Serbian and is controlled by the Russia. This is our, we had the government in the one of the NATO member country that was pro-Russia. And this is our reality, and I hope that our allies should be more involved and support the pro-Western forces in Montenegro. Because why Montenegro is so important? Because the access on the Mediterranean Sea. When the Russia was pressuring our government before the joining NATO to allow the entrance of the military ships in Montenegrin ports, you know, because at that moment, that was before the war in Syria, they couldn't access any port in the Mediterranean Sea, and this was a logistical big problem for the Russians when they are coming from the, let's say, St. Petersburg, and they want to enter in the Black Sea. So, and they need, because having control over the Serbia and having the access to Montenegrin Sea, it could change a lot of the strategical, let's say, momentum in the Western Balkans and Mediterranean. And they will never give up from that. That very sure. Russia and the Serbia will invest a lot, because the Serbia is doing the same, is just mimicking the Russia. The problems they don't have, they are not nuclear power, they are not so strong, and they are surrounded by NATO member countries. That's the difference. But the approach is the same. One of the main dailies in the Serbia, tabloid, but controlled pro-government tabloid, Informer, and it's not only pro-government, it is owned by the very close friends of the President Vučić. They published the front line, on the first page, the article with the headlines, Ukraine attack Russia. So this is how far that propaganda goes, you know. It's completely ignoring the facts and trying to, and all this pro-Serbia, pro-government media in the Serbia, they are supporting aggression or Russian aggression on Ukraine, you know. And I know personally that the ideas that Serbia should copy-paste the action of Russia on Crimea, you know, on north of Kosovo, it's still very active in the hands of those who are deciding in Belgrade. You know, so the Serbia and Russia will continue destabilizing the Western Balkans, and only if the response of the West would be much strict, much stronger, that they will intervene, not military, because at this moment it doesn't need to be like that, but politically, another way, we should have more massive pro-Western presence in the Western Balkans.
Thank you, Zlatko. So, in terms of what you just mentioned, do you believe that this might actually lead to the renewal and revision of the common foreign policy of the European Union, especially in terms of that policy towards the Balkans? Because, as you said, we've seen so far that EU is very not so strong, especially with the division itself when it comes to the further integration of the Western Balkans. Then we have the new initiative Open Balkans, which in some to some degree the EU, both the EU and the United States are supporting. What's your take on this, let's say, at least dubious initiative for the Western Balkans? How this initiative can bring the countries closer to the EU or further away? And in those terms, we've seen that Serbian President Vučić hasn't yet taken a stand on the situation in Ukraine, and probably will do so in the next 24 hours after the meeting with the EU. But we have the announcement of the Russian head of the Secret Service coming to Belgrade next week.
So definitely EU will be forced to change the approach, not only regarding the Western Balkans, but also I think it is necessary to change approach toward the Moldova and the Georgia and also Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is a very special case, but I think that if they will, I hope that they will learn from the mistakes in the case of the Ukraine and all other countries, you know, because they were too slow and they allow that their internal disputes are blocking the process of European integration in the Western Balkans and in other countries like the Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. So definitely, I expect they will propose, they will define, they will offer something that is not like that, you know, like previous abroad, because, you know, negotiating so long, the accession of the Bulgaria and Romania was strongly attacked because of the case of corruption. Those countries are improving. The situation in Romania and Bulgaria, especially Romania, is much better than 20 years ago. It is a slow process, but I think those decisions were good. Especially when we are thinking, imagine like now, if Putin wanted to control the Black Sea basin with the Turkey, you know. So okay, let's move to Moldova. Let's go to Bulgaria. Bulgaria, they were part of the agreement from Warsaw. You know? So we couldn't imagine where this could go. So I think that I expect the change of the main policies, and I think that they should be much more involved, not only in Western Balkans, because Western Balkans definitely they are going to be one of the key points. You mentioned, Azra, you mentioned the President Vučić, but you know what President Vučić says, it's not so important, because what he is doing, what he does, it's much more important, because and that doesn't always correspond to what he's saying, because he's changing. For example, in the case of the Montenegrin coup d'etat, first he appeared on the press conference confirming all accusation from the prosecutor office of Montenegro, and after Patrushev visits to Serbia, he completely changed his mind. And he blocked any kind of the flow of the proofs in the possession of the Serbian authorities to Montenegro that he promised before. So the influence of Russia is really strong, and but it's not only that he's under the pressure of Russia. He really believes in those values. That's the problem, and I think that the West doesn't understand that. Vučić, the Serbian Progressive Party, and all those forces that are ruling the country, were the same coalition that entered in the conflict with NATO in 1999. Yes, the position will change. Now Vučić has the dominant power, and the Socialist People Party, previously led by the Milošević, you know, is the main coalition. It's a smaller coalition partner. No, but the values are the same. Yes, they have much better PR now, public relations. The West thinks it could negotiate with them. But when we are talking about the Russian, they really support what Russia is doing. I don't know what he's going to say. He will try to balance it or something like that, you know. But he's the very strong Russian ally in the Western Balkans and the key proxy there. And that's going to remain like that.
Thank you very much, Zlatko, for this thorough analysis and comparison. I would like to bring Natalia back to the conversation as she's been here for several years in Montenegro. And what maybe are the key takeaways and the key recommendations for Montenegro in terms of what we've learned from the situation in Ukraine? So,
sorry, I didn't hear. It's a question for me or for someone?
No, it was a question for Natalia, but I'm not sure if she's online. While we wait to check that, I will move to you, Mikhailo. You've been to the region here, and you've closely observed the situation both here and in Ukraine. What's your take on the let's say the things that we should learn from what is happening, not just now in Ukraine, but for the past decade?
Yeah, obviously the main reason of the situation we have now that the total system of international law destroyed, and we don't have any. You see now that we don't have any international organization which could stabilize situation in any area of the world. Unfortunately, United Nations and the Security Council cannot complete this mission and achieve this goal. As obviously we saw it in 2014, we saw it in Georgia 2008, and especially last years we can see that Russia understood that they could act like in the new Middle Ages, when the right of the force they can use instead of the right of the law. And now we see it's absolutely in bright picture and very contrast and bright picture what we have now. So I think that what should we learn from this situation already, that we should try together with our Euro-Atlantic partners and allies, try to build a new system of security which could stabilize, not only guarantee something, but stabilize situation in the world. I several times during these years always told that, you see, if European Union and NATO is going to be a geopolitical powers, they need to issue responsibility not inside of the organization, but beyond, because Russia is always have an initiative on the building and a special schedule and agenda for international relations and development of the situation. For example, if you look at the Black Sea, so for years we are talking about that Russia is totally dominating in Black Sea region with Azov Sea, etc. And NATO in this time, on this period, didn't create any strong strategy, any even concept on how to act on the Black Sea. NATO doesn't have the permanent command and permanent naval units in Black Sea. It means that Russia now acting very free and without any hesitations and without any resistance from NATO countries. Now we have a news that Russia is trying to occupy the Serpent Island. What we actually deployed is a lot of scenarios, a lot of brainstorming for years after 2014. What happened if Russia will occupy Serpent Island? And it will be a total catastrophe, not only for Ukraine, but in the same time it will be very bad challenge for Romania and other countries, because as you know, the Serpent Island is staying exactly on the economical zone of Romania and very close to Romanian territory. So it means that it will be a direct military threat from Russia now to NATO countries as NATO and as Romania. And so I think that the main point now is try to consolidate our understanding of the situation and try to build something more than only the defensive alliance. It's not enough now, obviously, because I'm not sure actually, because the internal policy of the NATO by some of the members obviously is a challenge for NATO itself, because I am not sure that if Russia now attack, for example, one of the Baltic states, and all of NATO members will vote for defend this Baltic state. I'm not sure, because Russia obviously has absolutely domination in for example, in northern part of the northern flank of the NATO, and if Russia will organize the same operation like now they conducting in Ukraine, obviously NATO is not ready for defending from these kind of operations, and this is absolutely great challenge for international order in not only in our region, but I think it globally. And I hope that we will act fast now, and international community and especially Euro-Atlantic community will act very fast and very effective to stop Russian behavior, which is absolutely crazy and absolutely out of the understanding the 21st century and next future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mikhailo, for this analysis, and I think we've skipped a deadline for this conversation, but there is so much topics to cover. On this note, I would like to give a final round to everyone on their final takes. I'm not sure how optimistic can we all be at this very moment, but I would like to hear first from Othon, then Zlatko, and I would like to finish as we started with Natalia. Othon.
Yeah, one quick point I would like to mention, which we haven't discussed enough, is I think what kind of role the United States is going to play in this, because we are still not convinced whether the United States is really committed to, I mean, there have been military armaments and weapons that have gone to Ukraine on a bilateral level, but actually what the United States needs to show is leadership in this. In terms of, you know, in military terms, but also in political terms. And I'm still not convinced as to how this is, you know, going to pan out. The other thing with the United States is that it's also, you know, for the last 10 years, it's been having its eye on the Indo-Pacific area. And that's what we've been seeing as well with the UK. Once it got out of the European Union, it also focused the attention there. That means that it provided the environment for Russia actually to operate more freely in the European, in its own neighborhood, of course, but at the same time in the Eastern Mediterranean as well. So I think it's very important what kind of position the US is going to take. Will it continue to have its eye on the Indo-Pacific and its own competition with China, or whether it kind of thinks that, you know, the battleground is once again on European soil, and we need to, you know, to do something there. I believe that this is a moment also for the United States that will strengthen the ties. It's a good thing that we are not working with the Trump administration, but with the Biden administration, but they just need to show that they're much more forceful in terms of committing for the independence of Ukraine, basically.
Thank you very much, Othon. That's a very good point. It will definitely affect global affairs, and it will affect how United States positions in this crisis. It will determine how or let's say international order will be defined for the upcoming decade. Zlatko, your final takes. I think you're muted.
I think that the Ukraine should receive much more stronger support, not only with involving the more severe sanctions toward Russia, but also providing a lot of the arms that are sophisticated in order to help Ukrainian forces to fight back to the Russians. On the other hand, I think that we should learn from the case of the Ukraine, prevent this kind of the scenario in Moldova, in Georgia, and in the Western Balkans. And I think that especially in Montenegro, the US in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the US involvement and the European partners involvement should be much stronger in order to prevent the Russian proxies like Serbia to destabilize the region. And this is the breaking point. After this, nothing would be the same, not only in the Europe, but also in the Western Balkans.
Thank you very much. And for the final notes, as we started, Natalia, I would like to give floor to you for the final assessment.
We live at the moment of new reality now. And of course, it's up to us on the international community how we will react to this drastic breach of international law and any possible laws the world has been living according to for the last at least 50 years. Unfortunately, we didn't learn the lessons from Georgia and 2014 from Ukrainian lesson. I hope that this is the last lesson that the world has to learn, and it will definitely learn that you cannot allow one person or one country to do whatever it wants, and it should be punished at the very beginning. Of course, I hope that the international community will stand by Ukraine firmly, not just with words. We need real support in fighting the truth. And it's not just high words, empty words or political words that the destiny of the whole world and world order is now decided on the Ukrainian ground. We are fighting for our country, and we will do that no matter what, but still the help of the international community is much needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia, and I believe that's like a final take that we should all take from today's conversation, that the unity and cohesion in fighting the autocratic regimes and fighting for democracy should be a priority. As we've seen, there is a lot of regions that could be at stake at some point in future, especially when I say this, when I and think of the Western Balkans as well. So I want to thank you all for this insightful discussion. I want to convene our hopes and prayers with the Ukrainian people and all of your families. I also want to thank our partners, Balkan Trust for Democracy and USAID, who supported this project and are supporting the similar initiatives of the Atlantic Council that tries to raise the awareness and the level of discussion that is so much needed, especially these days in for the stability and security of the region, but the world as well. Again, thank you very much, and thank you to all of you who tuned in this morning. Let's hope to hear from all of you at some better moment for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.